I want a coffee. Beer. Coffee. Beer. Cobeer. That's a joke from The Simpsons, and it's good to start with a joke because AEW is going to the land down under, and I'm kind of a little bit worried about how, and I'm kind of like a little upset because they're actually going to do a special Collision episode instead of actually, a real pay per view, and it bothers me because the first year they went from a pay per view trying to sell a 50,000 seat arena to selling out a maybe to having like 11,000 people at another arena. And that's that really. So I kind of said to myself, what if they made a pay per view? What if they made like a 2 night pay per view and they really blew people's socks off? What would the show look like? What would the match card be? Because honestly, if they want to go to Australia like once a year, they have to go bigger and better because obviously AEW needs to hit it on all cylinders. So they're doing a show in Brisbane, and then they're going to do a show in Sydney. So I'm going to like say this: that here's what they should do for the Friday night show, and here's what they should do for the Saturday night show as far as the pay per view. So this is my fantasy booking for a AEW pay per view for the 2 nights in Australia. You drink a little bit of beer, you're a little tired. So the first match that I would have is the Rascals versus the Outrunners and Dalton Castle for a trio versus Shane Taylor Promotions versus the Young Bucks and Jack Perry. So this is like fatal four-way trios, a fatal four-way trios match. And the reason why I want to do this is to put a lot of people on the card. The other thing is that with AEW, they don't have a lot of good divisions. They don't build their divisions that well. So a lot of people are looking at the trios division because Hangman is in there, and they just switched the title. So let's ride that momentum. I do want the Outrunners and Dalton Castle to win, but I think you can do that at like a Wembley Stadium show. Give something really big to Dalton Castle. Shane Taylor Promotions, they've been in AEW for a very long time. You need to kind of graduate them from Ring of Honor. The Young Bucks and Jack Perry, people like them. And then also the Rascals, they're a new team. So it makes sense for the Rascals to actually just, be very active. And then I would do a tournament for the AEW championship. So the winner of this tournament faces MJF or Kenny Omega at Revolution this year. So the first round, I would have Brody King versus Samoa Joe, Hangman versus Swerve, Bandito versus Kyle Fletcher, and John Moxley versus Okada. Brody King, because the story of Brody King is like he wants to beat MJF for hurting his friend. The other part of it is that MJF disrespects him a lot, and then the other part of it is that he's a bigger body guy. So a lot of people want to see more bigger body people in AEW get a chance. Samoa Joe, obviously, he's one of like the four pillars now. It's Joe, Swerve, Hangman, and MJF. So that makes sense. You can even do something where MJF sets up the tournament and says, okay, well, the next match in my tournament is going to be Hangman and Swerve, the pin fronting his friend. I'm going to do Bandito and Kyle Fletcher. And the reason why I want to do Bandito again is because, he can talk about like how MJF cheap shot at him. He's making fun of him for being Mexican. He's saying, I want to represent the Mexican people. I know that I can just do it with one more shot. So there's a story there. Kyle Fletcher. Like maybe MJF can do something like saying, okay, you're an Australia boy, you're a New Zealand boy, you got to be in this. And then John Moxley makes sense because he won the Continental Classic. And then you can also have Okada go in there because they can make an argument about Okada because Okada has been he's held like the Continental Championship for over a year. I think he's been held the International Championship for about a year. And you know what? He's never really got an opportunity to be in the heavyweight title picture. So you know what? And also he's kind of like an arrogant prick. So maybe I'm just like saying, I see myself in you, or something like that. Really, except I'm not Japanese. I'm Jewish. You know, there's something that they can kind of do to put Okada in this. And then the next match you have is Chris Statlander versus Tekla, last bitch standing. They're having a match this week. So I think they can do a rematch with a stipulation, and they can make this a hardcore stipulation, show what the women can do. Because we don't always need to see Darby Allin doing hardcore shit. Um, you can do Mark Briscoe versus Andrade for the TNT Championship. You can also do Ricochet versus Anthony Bowens for the national championship. The reason why I want to do this is because Anthony Bowens, to me, can be a big star. I think he has a lot of great talk. You can do something where Max Caster interferes or screws him over, and they have a fight, and then they can lead to a fight, and they can lead to a fight with between them at Revolution, and that could be good because Anthony Bowens is from Los Angeles, California, so you can do something off of that. You could also add a Darby Allin match. I don't know who he would face, but you can do like Darby Allin versus El Colon or Darby Allin versus one of the Death Riders. Again, you could probably say, okay, it's like best 2 out of 3 with Pac or something like that. But like Darby Allin's on the poster, so you may want to give him something. Or Darby Allin versus Gabe Kidd, part 2 or something like that. The next match you can do is Athena versus Tony Storm for the ROH Championship. The reason why I want to do that is because Tony Storm is from Oceania, either New Zealand or Australia, but you really, really just have to. But there really has to be a thing where um, Tony Storm is kind of like, hey, you know what? She's a big deal. She's a big star. Tony Storm. Athena, like you want to kind of put her in a big spot as well. Really, like I think that this year she needs to lose the ROH Championship. But I really think that you want to put Tony Storm in a big spot. I don't see a lot of women on the card who are like these new stars that are coming up really. So I think that this is the best way to use Tony Storm on both nights because she is a star for the Australia. So the next night for Saturday night they have another show in Australia. So what I would do is you do the quarterfinals and you do the finals of the AEW Championship Tournament. You win this tournament, you get a shot at MGF's title at Revolution. So I'll do Brody King as a winner because Brody King has to honestly start beating people to prove that he's a good single star. This is the direction they want to make him a single star. So Brody King has to win in the quarterfinals. So he's facing Swerve Strickland because again, that's a matchup that would be really cool. They can do a rematch. And then Swerve beats Hangman. So I want Hangman to lose on both nights, really, because that can make Hangman. You can be like, is Hangman going to turn heel or whatever, really, against Swerve or whatever, really. So this is kind of good because this is going to make Hangman look a little unpredictable. And you also have Kyle Fletcher versus Okada. They would have their match. Takeshita fucks over Okada and Kyle Fletcher wins. So the finals will be Brody King versus Kyle Fletcher. And Brody King will win because obviously this way he faces Joe, Swerve, and Kyle Fletcher. And that would be good because it builds his abilities. And then you have like your babyface monster and Brody King versus MJF. And the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to do Swerve versus MJF, Hangman versus MJF, Will Ospreay versus MJF, Samoa Joe versus MJF. Because the problem is if you do that too soon, it's ARW, all repeat wrestling. Let's have a new person. People are criticizing that Hobbs was not used that well because they don't push big men that well. So this kind of fixes a lot of issues. You could even do something Brody King turns heel against Bandito, takes the ROH championship. Or you could do something where Brody King actually beats MJF and he has like a title run for a couple of months. You never know. You switch things up a little bit. You never know. The next match I'll do is Hangman Jet Speed versus the Rascals for the AEW Trios titles. So you can have Jet Speed and Hangman lose, and then they separate. Like Jet Speed chooses to go after the tag team titles, and Hangman's like, you know what, okay, I need some time to think because I don't know why I'm on this losing streak. You can do something like that, and then have the Rascals be the Trios Championship because they have some really funny segments. They are being characters. They don't care about having match after match. They care about being a character while having match after match, and that's what they need to do. The next thing is that they have the Babes. The next match that I'll have is the Babes of Wrath versus the Timeless Love Bombs for the trios titles. I think Tony Storm and Mia Shirakawa should turn heel, but this is a good match. You have Harley Cameron, and then also Tony Storm. They're both from Oceania, so you can change the titles at this point and put it on Mia Shirakawa and Tony Storm for a while. Or you can have them lose, and then they're like, okay, then they just beat them up, and they're like, okay, we're going to try it as villains now. The next match I would do is FTR versus Ace Austin and Jay White for the tag team titles because first of all, the tag team championship should be defended. The next thing is that FTR is kind of like on this arrogant prick type of run, and then the other thing about it that I really feel is that you don't have a lot. You have a lot of heel tag teams. You have the Don Callis family. You have Pro Toshida. You also have I think you have Hechicero and Lance Archer, and they're trying to do other combinations like Mike Davis and somebody else. And there's three tag teams within that. You can also do Okada Takeshita as a tag team. So there's different combinations you can do in the Don Callis family. You also have the people. You also have the Don Callis family facing the Young Bucks. You also have the Death Riders, which are like tweeners now. So there's a lot of just like either heels or tweeners. There's not like a lot of babyface tag teams. So FTR versus Ace Austin and Jay White's good. Jay White comes back, or you can have Juice Robinson because he's also from Australia, I believe, or New Zealand. Ace Austin's good because Ace Austin, a lot of people are paying attention to him. A lot of people like him. So why not kind of like elevate who you have, elevate who has some momentum. And the last match is that I'll do El Colon versus Mascara Dorada for two reasons. That number one, I think this week Hologram's going to come back and he's going to try to fight Mascara Dorada. But I know he's going to try to fight El Colon. But I think that El Colon, unfortunately, what they did with El Colon last year is that he was palling around with Don Callis. They really didn't have a match with him. They didn't show what he could do, really. So I think before you bring Hologram back, you have to have El Colon go on a bit of a winning streak or basically beat all the luchadors. You can even do something like El Colon versus Bandito for the ROH Championship at Revolution, and then maybe Josh Alexander versus Bandito at at the ROH Canada show or something like that, or even Kenny Omega versus versus him. Because I think that'll all be really some really great stuff. But I'm going to do El Colon versus Mascara Dorada because I think Mascara Dorada has a lot of potential. Him El Colon just going through him is not a problem because he went through Commander and he went through another luchador. So I really think that he can go through a little bit more luchadors before you have that ultimate Hologram versus El Colon match. And in my opinion, if you do like a 2-night show with pay-per-view caliber matches, you tell the Australia crowd, hey, you know what? If we go to AEW, they're not treating us like a Collision or a Saturday night show, which most people don't watch. They're actually respecting us, So maybe you're trying to improve what you did from what happened last year. Because last year, they had a 50,000 seat arena. It wasn't selling that well. So they went to a small arena. They got like over 12,000 people, I believe. And they decided to do a Collision show because they didn't want to, because they also kind of ran into that issue with AEW, which is they don't know how to tell stories. So they're like, okay, we don't want to have we don't want to treat this like a pay-per-view because we don't know how to follow over from Australia to Revolution. So let's treat this like a Collision. Let's treat this like filler until we get to Revolution. And then with all this stuff, really, you can build a lot of stories. You have Brody King win this tournament. Now he and MJF are spitballing each other for a couple of weeks. You have Hangman wondering why he's on a losing streak. You have the Rascals being arrogant with their titles, maybe not taking it seriously, maybe taking it a little funny or whatever. You know what? They're not serious champions. That's a story. You have timeless Tony Storm and Mia Shirakawa embracing their darkness to become the women's tag team title champions. I mentioned also too, if I've not mentioned this before, I would have MJF versus Kenny Omega because you want to give them at least a championship match. So you have MJF win, you can have Kenny Omega be like, you know what, maybe I don't have it anymore. I'm winding down my career, and he goes on like maybe a retirement or a pseudo retirement tour. You have FTR versus Ace Austin, Jay White. You have like maybe FTR beat them down. You have Adam Copeland and Christian Cage come back, and they challenge them at Revolution, or they challenge them in Vancouver. Or and then also El Colon versus Mascara Dorada. You have El Colon win, then you can show hologram, and then Don Cal says something like, "Okay, well, hologram's coming back at Revolution, but every single week, El Colon from now to Revolution, El Colon is gonna be taking out somebody." And then also too, you have Swerve who is frustrated that he lost, so maybe he's kind of pissed, and and then maybe like he and Hangman can't control their anger, so then maybe they can feud one more time, or they're like, okay, you know what, you're pissed, I'm pissed. Maybe we can have another match at Revolution, or MJF says, okay, you know, I see you guys putting a great effort, but you're both losers, so I want to see who's the biggest loser. So you guys have one more match against each other at Revolution, and then the winner of that match will face me at will face me at Dynasty. That could be something. Um, and then you have Kyle Fletcher screw over Okada, Takeshita screw over Okada. Then you can do something like Okada versus Takeshita, or Kyle Fletcher versus Takeshita, or have Kyle Fletcher and Takeshita lead the Don Callis family. You have Samoa Joe kind of pissed off he's on a losing streak. Maybe becomes a single star, or maybe he leaves to go film movies for a while. You have Tekla who could become the women's champion and ride with that. Really, you can have Mark Briscoe take away the TNT Championship. You have Anthony Bowens either win or lose, and if he loses, maybe Max Caster is cheering or gets clumsy, or Max Caster turns on him. They have one more like, we're pissed with each other, we're not getting along, let's just settle this at Revolution and let's shake hands after that. You can do that as well, really. Athena can say, hey, you know what, I beat Tony Storm, you know, the probably the most decorated woman in AEW right now, since Mercedes took her ball and went home like a little bitch. So I'm the best of the best, really. And this year I am gonna beat the Hulk Hogan, you know, title run. So you see what I'm trying to do here. Everything you see on my match card, this 2 night like pay-per-view fantasy booking that I'll do. There's stories, there's tie-ins that you can do to Revolution, which is about, you know, 4 to 5 weeks after this event, and then there's other stories you can tell throughout the year, because it's not about wrestling, it's about stories with wrestling that makes AEW great and all professional wrestling great.